All right, today's video we're going to talk about cleans. When you talk about cleans in the context of exercise, of training, one of the first questions people are going to ask is, well, what do you mean by a clean? What kind of clean? Are you talking about barbells? Are you talking about kettlebells? Are you talking about sandbags? The answer is yes. Today we're talking about cleans and how to generalize the skill, the movement tool that is the clean. How to take that concept and how to apply it to different objects, and how to get away from the idea of a clean is one thing in one context, and actually thinking, you know what, a clean is a tool, it's a movement skill that once you pick it up and once you internalize it, you can apply it to all sorts of things in training and in real life. So that is what we're going to talk about. All right, so if you look behind me, you'll see I have a whole bunch of things. I pulled the barbell out of the basement, dusted it off a little bit. Something I don't do that often in the videos. I've got some logs, I've got a bag of cement, sandbag, slam ball, 32 kg kettlebell, and a 16 kg kettlebell today. And the reason I have all these props is just to talk about the concept of a clean. So I want to talk about the why of this video. And last week we were running a session, and in the session members were they had kettlebell swings and they had goblet squats, and it was a pretty punchy countdown workout. And during the workout there's this part where everybody was getting their swings in and they're going their swings, and then when we were coaching we didn't really say anything. We just that you need to get into your goblet squats and do some goblet squats. But when the coach was running it, they didn't actually mention that this is an opportunity to do a nice smooth transition. They didn't even use the word clean actually, because you don't even need to clean. But it is nice to have some idea that you can use momentum to get a heavy object or a relatively heavy object into some kind of controlled rack position. So we were running it, you know, and people were doing their swings, they would do their last swing and they'd come down here. There's only a 16, so actually it's not that heavy. But they'd get down here, and then all of a sudden, even people who've been working out for 3 or 4 years were struggling, not exactly struggling, but just sort of really awkwardly getting the kettlebells up into some sort of goblet position. And the coach who's coaching it realizes, like, oh my gosh, nobody has internalized that this would be a great opportunity to do some version of a clean. And that's what I want to talk about today, is how to generalize, how anything that you learn while you're training should be something that you can apply to real life. It should have some kind of application to activities of daily living. It should make you better at something in the real world. And if it's not, if you're just compartmentalizing your movement as these discrete skills that only work in the context of conditioning, they're not getting the full benefit of it. So what we're going to talk about next is we're going to talk about what is a clean. All right, so the question is, what is a clean? And if you talk to an Olympic weightlifter, they're going to say a clean is one thing. They're going to be talking about a squat clean from the floor. Almost always, you know, in competition, it's going to be followed by a jerk, but you could just focus on cleans. If you're going to be talking about a CrossFitter, maybe they'll say, well, are you talking about high rep cycle cleans? Or are you talking about 1 rep max style cleans? But if you talk to someone who does kettlebell sport, you know, they're going to have an entirely different idea of what a clean is. If you talk to a strongman, they're going to have a different idea of what a clean is. And, you know, sometimes people will argue and bicker, and, you know, there's a bit of a hierarchy there where a lot of people might say, well, the Olympic clean is the only true clean, and then everything else, you know, is just a bastardization of it. But I don't think that's true, and for our purpose, I don't really want to argue, so let's just come up with a general definition of what a clean is. So a clean is you have something heavy below your hips, okay? So you've got something heavy that's below your hips. Could be on the ground, you could be holding it below the hips in some sort of hang position, or maybe in a classic kettlebell swing position, doesn't matter. You got something heavy that's below your hips, and you want to get that heavy object above your hips, but not just above your hips. You want to get it heavy above your hips in some sort of useful rack position. Now the rack position can be dependent on what your goals are, okay? If it's a kettlebell, maybe you're just going to do a classic front rack like that. If it's a barbell, maybe you'll do a classic front rack like that. If you're using something like a log, maybe you get it up to your shoulder. Maybe you get it into a ZERCHER position. Same thing with a sandbag. Maybe you get in a ZERCHER position. Maybe you get it over here. Honestly, maybe you get something if you're carrying long distance, maybe like a basket or a box or something. Maybe it makes sense to put it on your head. but the rack position should be something that can work as a resting position where you have advantageous leverage, where you're not holding something out like this, for example. Or the reason a deadlift wouldn't be a clean is because a deadlift just gets something up to your hips. So if you're walking with, say, a barbell, it'd be quite awkward to walk with the barbell if you just got it up to here with the deadlift. Whereas, you know, if you get up to a clean, all of a sudden you have it in this rack position. It's something you could move around with. You could press it up, put it in a back rack position, whatever. So the clean should be a useful movement tool that allows you to get something heavy from below your hips to above your hips in a comfortable rack position. And then from there, you should be able to do something else useful with it, whether it's loading it onto a truck, carrying it, passing it to somebody else, moving it. That's what we want a clean to be. So that's going to be our running definition, which means that whenever we talk about cleaning with these other implements, it's all going to fall under the rubric of a clean. And we don't need to hear anybody say, well, you know, technically a clean is done with an Olympic barbell, you know, from below the hips or whatever. No, we're not really worried about that. We just want to get something heavy, get it to a controlled rack position. All right, I got this barbell out today because I just want to talk about barbells. Barbells are obviously great tools. They're very easy to precisely load. If you go to a good gym, you know a barbell is more or less as a barbell around the world. If you go to a gym that has some version of Olympic barbell, you know it's going to weigh 20 kilos. You know it's going to be about 2.2 meters long. You know that standard barbell is going to be 28 millimeters, I guess, in diameter. And then you also know that if you're using Olympic plates, it's going to be roughly about 9 inches off the ground. So this is great. It's universal. Means that Olympic weightlifters around the world can compare their weights. It's great. But we need to remember that a lot of what we think of as a classic clean, Olympic clean, is based around the constraints. They're artifacts that are based around the assumption that you're using a barbell. So a lot of the rules that we have about cleans when you get away from a barbell are no longer technically true. There's going to be some general points of performance that you can apply to everything, but a lot of the smaller nuances, the specialized nuances of cleaning with a barbell aren't going to apply to everything. So the other thing I want to say about Olympic weightlifting is great, but the return on investment is not initially good. I think that the sort of fad, Olympic weightlifting isn't a fad, but in the fitness industry there was a period where everyone wanted to pretend that they were an Olympic weightlifting coach, even if they weren't. You'd go to any sort of big box gym in the world and you'd see, you know, you see the trainers there and they say they were working on cleans with their clients, but they'd be doing something like this, or I don't know, they'd be doing a deadlift and then be stopping, and then, I don't know, they'd be jumping and all kinds of stuff. And, you know, there could be a whole host of benefits to that. But what they were doing wasn't really applicable to Olympic weightlifting. You have to realize that Olympic weightlifters are going to be moving hundreds and hundreds of kilos of weight. For the average person, they're not going to be moving hundreds and hundreds of kilos of weight. So some of the technique that would be true and would be required in a 200 kilo clean and jerk is not going to be true if you're getting somebody to clean 32, 40 kilos, whatever. It's not to say the technique is bad. The technique is excellent. It's very good. But it's something that won't be required for most people. And if you're looking for return on investment, the number of hours and months of training that it takes to get pretty good at Olympic weightlifting, in terms of how quickly you can get somebody to comfortably get like a sack of, I don't know, gravel or potting soil up to their shoulder, or getting somebody to comfortably move around a heavy rock or a log, entirely different. You know, I could train someone to safely get a sandbag up to their shoulder and walk around with it in one session. Whereas if I'm working with someone on Olympic cleans, it could take months before they get something that really starts to resemble a true clean. So I wanted to talk about that really quick before I go into the barbell clean. So like I said, there's a lot of peculiarities to working with a barbell that just aren't pertinent to non-barbell tools, but since I've got one in front of me, I might as well talk about this, and we can talk about how cleaning other objects will differ from that. So first thing, you got the knurling on the barbell. You know it's 28 millimeters. Probably going to use some version of hook grip, which you're not going to use for other things. It's a specialized tool. So if I'm doing a hook grip, I know that I'm about a thumb away from the knurling. I come in sideways, I lock my thumb underneath, I really get a good twist on it. I want to make sure it's tight right there. Find the same distance over here, tight, okay. From here, I want to make sure I pull myself down and I pull all the slack out of the barbell, okay. So I don't want to do any quick jerky movements. You want it to be nice and smooth. My bum is down low, my chest is up high. I come up, okay, and I clean. My fingers popped out. I haven't done my wrist mobility in a while, but you get the idea, okay? Then obviously that would be some sort of power clean up to a muscle clean variation, where if I were using really, really heavy weight, I would receive it as more of a classic squat clean. But because the weight's not that heavy, there's no reason for me to do it. And most of the weight we're using today, not gonna be necessary for a squat clean. So on the clean, the reason I'm showing you this is because there are some universal patterns that we'll see in other movements. So number one, okay, obviously I don't have to worry about the hook grip, but when I come up, I am gonna get a low hip, high chest position. And the reason for that is that this is not a deadlift, number one. And if you get to some heavier rocks or heavier sandbags or whatever, you really wanna think about your levers. And what I mean is, if I've got something really far away from me now, if I'm doing a classic hinge and then I stand up, all I've done is I've just brought my hips to the bar, but when I'm in the standing position, there's not going to be any power here. So when you're doing your cleans, you get yourself in this position down here. You're going to pull your knees back, come up here, and actually you're going to get to this power position, something that looks a bit like this. My knees are going to be bent a little bit, my ankle is going to be bent a little bit. I've got lots of potential energy here, so that when I'm doing it, I can explode up and get underneath it. And then in terms of levers, if my bum is down low, my chest is up high like this, all right, it means the barbell is going to stay much closer to my body. At no point does the barbell ever really get away from me. Whereas if I have a high bum hinge position from here, if you look at my back as a lever, okay, there's actually going to be a long period where the barbell is really far away. And if we're moving lots of weight, if we're moving hundreds of kilos here, that's going to be way, way too heavy for me to put any power on. I need to keep my levers in this case as short as I can in terms of having the weight close to me as opposed to far away from me. Because if it gets far away from me, it's just going to multiply the perceived weight of the object, and there's no way that I'm going to be able to clean it properly. So we do have some universal points of performance here that we can take. Another thing I guess I should talk about is the front rack position. Let's go ahead and clean it up again really quick. So, get myself tight, bum down low, chest up high. There we go. Okay, that was a better front rack that time. So we're up here, we've got the front rack position, and a barbell is gonna be elbows up high, barbell's right up against your neck. You sort of feel the weight on your deltoids. My wrists aren't really doing much right here, but I'm supporting the weight, and sure enough, I could walk around with it if I wanted to. I could pop it up in my back rack position. It's a useful position, this rack. It's not as though I did like what some people do, hang on. If I was working out of the barbell rack and I pulled the barbell out of this position right here, some people do their front squats with, it's gonna be really hard to do anything else useful with this position. I'm not gonna be able to pass to somebody. I guess I could carry it a little bit, but from there all I can do is drop it. I can't do anything else with it. So that's why the classic front rack position is gonna be preferred for barbell work. One of the things I alluded to earlier is that the clean is a general skill. So one of the questions I always ask people is, what can we clean? The answer is you can clean anything. If there is something that's heavy, I would say too heavy for you to easily pick it up and sort of curl it up into a position where you can manipulate it, then there's a good opportunity to clean. You don't need specialized equipment for cleaning. You could clean a child if you're playing with them. You could clean, like I said, a bag of gravel, potting soil if you're doing gardening. There's lots of opportunities to clean if you're moving logs, lots of opportunities to clean. So you can clean pretty much anything as long as you get up to it, you use your lower body to impart momentum on it, and then you get it into a controlled rack position. So I guess the next thing I should talk about is what is a front rack, or what is a rack position? All right, so I already talked about the barbell and the front rack position on the barbell. I'm going to talk about some of these other objects and what a front rack position is. So I've got a kettlebell here, heavy kettlebell, heavy for me, 32 kg. And if I was going to go ahead and clean it up, my front rack position here for most kettlebell work is going to be keeping the kettlebell close to your center line. Some people will say thumb on your collarbone, thumb on your midline. elbow tucked in, keeping it close, pretty straight wrist. This is something I could walk around with, I could potentially lunge with it, I could get it overhead. This is a useful position for me. Okay, so this is one version of a rack. This is the classic kettlebell rack position. But the reason I have a 32 kg kettlebell here is going back to the original reason we did this video, which is to get people to think about how to clean. Imagine you cannot do a classic swing clean of a kettlebell, and imagine that you need to move this. Don't think of it as a kettlebell, think of it as a rock. Think of it as a rock with handles. There are other styles of cleans that you could do. So one of them, if you're not doing a swing clean, if you're not in the middle of a workout where you're doing high reps of things, maybe this is just sitting on the ground, you need to move it, you need to pass something, you need to get it overhead, maybe you have to load it onto a truck. Well, let's see if we can take, you know, some of the points of performance on the barbell and apply it to something else. So here we have a 32 kg kettlebell. Imagine it's too heavy for me to do a classic clean. I can still do some kind of clean on this. So if I come down, bum down low, chest up high, get my levers good, all I need to do is anything about putting upward momentum on it. And in this case, because I don't have to worry about the bar dragging along my shins, because it's gonna be in between right here, you can do the classic cue that a lot of people do anyway, which is to think about jumping. This isn't a highly technical movement, so I'm very happy to say that. Just think about jumping, imparting some momentum on it, and then think about what sort of rack position you're gonna do. I could either grab from the horns and hold it this way, or I could flip it up and over and sort of catch it in a goblet position, which might be a little bit more comfortable to put my hands on there. So let's try a few, okay? Coming down here, I'm just gonna go straight up. Okay, that's pretty good. Caught it, put a little bit of energy on it, fine. This is something most people can do. Even if you cannot clean a kettlebell, you can get most people to pick that up. Also put a little flip on it. So from here and up. Great, okay. Now, I'm not catching it in a squat or anything right now because I don't need to catch it in a squat. I am catching it with soft knees. I am absorbing the energy, keeping my chest up high. If it were really heavy, I could catch it a little bit lower, that's fine. Something like that, I can absorb the energy, that's fine. But I'm not gonna go through the pantomime of squatting if I don't actually need to in this case. All right, so different ways to clean a kettlebell. Got a slam ball here. What's the front rack for this gonna be? Well, it depends what we wanna do. Obviously there are a lot of groups that will do that'll do medicine ball or slam ball cleans. So standard's gonna be the same. You want your bum down low. Some people say it's a deadlift position. I'd say it's probably hips a little bit lower. But from here, explode up, catch it like that. That could be my front rack. There's a bit of pantomime here because it's 10 kg. I could just pick it up if I wanted to. But another thing might be useful for me is to get it up on my shoulder. Same thing, up, get it up on my shoulder. Okay, that's useful. Like I said, that's probably a bit too light for it to be truly useful. So let's go ahead and move over to a sandbag and talk about heavy sandbag cleans and options with a sandbag. All right, I've got a sandbag here. It's about 32, 33 kilos, something like that. This is starting to get to a good weight. I would say a slam ball is probably good for people who haven't really moved much before as an introductory implement for cleaning. Now, obviously, there's tons of uses for slam balls, but if we're going to talk about cleaning and we want it to be meaningful, we want people to start using weights that are realistically heavy. You don't want to go through the pantomime of teaching somebody how to clean with an object that's way too light. You want to use an object that's heavy enough so they actually need to use relatively good form and they get some feedback. Just one of the number one things when you're working with people with resistance training, you need to get to that point where they're confident enough so they can actually use weight that's heavy enough to be beneficial. Same way that it's very hard to do a proper kettlebell swing with a kettlebell that's too light, say a 6 kg kettlebell, because you're just not getting the feedback. You're not going to get that stretch shortening from your hamstring. Same thing when you're cleaning. You can sort of teach the basic skeleton of it, but until the weight gets heavy enough, it's not going to be meaningful for people. So I would say that this is a good size sandbag. When you start getting to 30 kg, people actually have to start respecting the weight and they see the utility of something because they realize that it isn't so light that they could just pick it up without thinking about it. So you're looking at a sandbag, you really have two options. You want to think, do I want to get up on my shoulders or do I want to get in my ZERCHER position? And either one is going to be good. These are strongman sandbags, so there's no handles. Let's go ahead and do shoulder first, and then we can talk about ZERCHER. So trying to think about universal points of performance on my sandbag clean. Want to stand close to it, bum down low, chest up high. Because it's a sandbag, we need to wiggle it back and forth and get a good grip underneath. We're going to explode up, get that full hip extension if we can, if it's meaningful for this movement. I'm going to bring it up to my shoulder. I'm going to catch it with soft knees. I'm not going to catch it by hyperextending. I'm going to catch it by doing some variation along the squat continuum. All right, coming down here, grabbing it, wheeling it back and forth, setting my back, exploding up. And we've got up my shoulder now. From here, I could walk around with it. I could load it onto a truck. If I wanted to, I could just launch it behind me, whatever. If you want to do a ZERCHER position, which is nice for lunges, and it's nice to get that kind of interior loading. It's also just a useful position to have. And I'll go back to the barbell at the end of the video and talk about other ways to pick up a barbell. But if you got this, you're going to want to orient the sandbag this time so it's lengthwise. I'm going to grab it underneath here. I'm going to explode it up, catch it, pop it in the crook of my elbow. So once again, get underneath it, pull myself down, chest nice and big. I'm going to explode up. Okay, and there we are. Okay, now I've got a sandbag. I can do different things with it. I can pass it to somebody, get it up here. I could throw it, whatever I want. Okay, so that is cleaning the sandbag, and that's going to be really useful for people. I was looking around the house to see if I had anything heavy, and I've got some bags of plaster or grout or something. These are 16 kg, so about 32, 33 pounds, something like that. So not super heavy, but heavy enough for people if they're not used to working with things. And this is another example of a weight. And if somebody didn't know how to do a clean, it would maybe look like this. Pick it up, get it on their knee. That's a big one. You got it here, and then you walk with it. And that's fine, but if you're moving a bunch of these, you're going to want to find a more efficient way to do it. And almost certainly, after someone, if they were moving bags all day like this, they'd come up with a more efficient way to do it. So they'd probably find some variation, coming down here, grabbing onto it, putting power onto it, catching it like that, or doing it this way, getting underneath it, launching it up, put it on your shoulders, and walking around. All right. Here's a real example of cleaning. This is a tree that went down a few months ago. I don't know what kind of wood it is, but it's quite a hard wood. It's heavier than a soft pine, and it's fresh. So each of these logs are heavier than you think. They're not well seasoned. This one, for some reason, has some rope embedded into it from a while back. I think someone was trying to hold it up, and it fell over anyway. This is a good example of a useful application of a clean. So again, looking at it, I can either go sideways and try a sort of ZERCHER thing. I don't think that's going to be very efficient though. So I'm going to flip it over and be mindful of that branch sticking out. I don't want to clock myself in the face with it. So I'm going to sort of stand over it, get my hands underneath it like this, watch the splinters, maybe stagger my grip a little bit. And I see, actually, this is not really going to work because it's hard for me to get some power on there. So maybe I do have to do a ZERCHER position on this, because otherwise I'm not going to be able to get a good grip on it. All right, so we will do ZERCHER. So I'm coming down here, bum down low, chest up high, explode. Okay, yeah, that was much better. So actually, in this case, getting up to a ZERCHER and then getting on my shoulder like this is probably going to be the best case scenario. So if you're running a session with your clients, I think it's worth doing some time doing a general cleaning class. And what I'd recommend is you get a bunch of random objects like I have, set them up, get people to think about the clean, get people to think about whatever clean they know, and get them to try to apply what they've learned from the clean to other objects, because we want to get people outside of this box. We want to get people out of thinking, oh, clean is something I do when I'm doing high rep kettlebell work, or clean is something I do on an Olympic platform, or clean is something that I do only with a strongman bag, or whatever. Now, clean can be anything you want if you have something heavy that's too heavy to get up. So now let's go ahead and talk about some universal points of performance, and then I'll show you a few other ways to pick up objects. All right, back to the sandbag. So 70 pounds on it, so about 32 kilos or so. So let's talk about some universal rules for cleaning in order to have an effective clean. We want to make sure that power comes from our hips. It's going to come from our quads a little bit. A classic Olympic clean is going to be a much more vertical movement. A kettlebell clean is going to have much more of a hinge component because of the nature of the tool that you're using. But if you're doing a dead clean off the ground and not part of some kind of cyclical clean, swing movement, then I think this is going to be a pretty good proxy for whatever we're doing. So standards are keeping the object close to you, just as you would a deadlift. Maybe if a barbell, maybe you keep it a little bit further away for shin room, but for us, we're going to come down here. You're going to come down and you're going to pull yourself into a tight position. I'm going to make sure I have a good grip on the object. Right now, my bum is too high and my back is rounded. I'm going to pull myself tight until I get tension. Now, if you're teaching people how to do this, just have them do a few explosive deadlifts a few times, just so they can get used to imparting some power on here. Now, you're obviously going to have to use your arms a little bit. It can't be all lower body. We also need to get people used to catching it in some sort of squat position. Again, you're not going to need to do a full squat, but you want to make sure that when people are absorbing the energy, they're absorbing the energy with the high chest to use this squatting energy absorption system rather than people who are going in over swinging and catching it over here in some kind of hyperextension. So once you get people doing that, you can go ahead and have them do a few squats with these. If you just want to get that worked up, do a few air squats, whatever, get people to think vertical as opposed to horizontal. And then all you have to do is you just get people to practice their cleans. Bum down low, chest up high, explode up, catch with soft knees. One, get the other shoulder, explode up, catch with soft knees. I'll do it from the side. Come down here, tension, explode up, catch, like that. So if you have a few sandbags, you can make your own sandbags, obviously, wrap them, throw in a canvas sack. That's gonna be a good workout. It's gonna get people's heart rates up. It's gonna have lots of application. So back to points performance, bum down low, chest up high, object close to you. Power is gonna come from your legs, from your quads, from your glutes. Explode up, put upper momentum on the object, come underneath it, catch it in some sort of stable rack position, whether it's a classic rack position, whether it's a ZERCHER position, whether it's on the shoulder, or anything else that's comfortable for you. So that's gonna be your generalized clean skill. Okay, so I said I'd talk about other ways to pick things up. Not every heavy object is gonna be appropriate for cleaning. It's always good to think about what your goals are. Why are you cleaning? So you think, am I doing this for conditioning? Is it high rep cycling? Am I moving something? Am I gonna be doing a lot of this all day? Is this a 1 rep max? These are all different considerations that will go into whether or not it's worth cleaning something. Generally, something you want to clean is something that is light enough so it's not like a max effort deadlift. Again, unless you're an Olympic weightlifter, but that's a whole different can of beans. But it should be something that you can put some upper momentum on. Now, there are some times where maybe cleaning isn't going to be appropriate. So a lot of people are going to be much stronger in their deadlift and their squat with their clean. Vast majority of people will be, unless they're specialized. So sometimes you have a barbell, you need to move it somewhere else. What are some other ways you can get that barbell up? Well, classic example is with the ZERCHER lift. You can do a ZERCHER squat out of this. This is very similar to all the strongman skills, very similar to lapping or strongman style log clean as well, but I'll talk about this. So imagine you want to get this up to a position, you need to move it around, you want to do some squats with it, it's on the ground, it's too heavy for you to clean. What can we do? Well, we can pick it up with a classic deadlift. We can come down here. Now I'm going to make my stance wide. This is much like a lapping thing. I'm going to find a resting position right here. This isn't wildly comfortable, but it's not bad. I'm going to get one elbow underneath. I'm going to get another elbow. I'm going to set my back and I'm going to stand. Now, okay, I can do squats with this. It's not comfortable, but it's something you can get used to. You can also put a bar across it. So that is one useful alternative to getting something in a rack position if you needed to move it. Be much more comfortable to do with a rock or an anvil or something, but a barbell gets the job done. Another way to clean is very similar. This is a strongman style clean. Normally this is done with a log. Let's see if I can do this. I should probably do another take, but I'll just do this on the fly. It's been a while. Same idea. You pick it up, you get it up here. Okay, in this case, you get it down here. I can already tell I'm not gonna be able to do this. I haven't done this in a while. Okay, but from here you get it as close to you as possible, and then you stand up. Okay, it's not a beautiful movement, and I would not recommend you did it the way I just did it right there. But you get the idea. What you're doing is reducing the distance you have to move the object, and then you just have to get your elbows underneath it. So that's another less elegant way to move something heavy. That's worth considering. Well, I've got the sandbag here. Might as well work with that too. This will probably be the most useful as a classic lap. So you got a heavy object. You want to pick it up. You want to move around. You have a deadlift. It feels a little bit too heavy to clean up to your shoulder in one explosive movement. So what can you do? Well, much like what we were just doing, set your back, pick it up, set it on your knees, come down here, find a resting position, get as close as you can so your shoulder is close to it, and pick it up like that. So this is something, if you want to move a rock or a field stone or a sandbag around, that's a very useful skill as well. So the best way to get your members to develop these skills is to give them some time to play around with these different objects and let them try to manipulate heavy objects outside of the context of just a high rep, high intensity workout. So ensure that you give some time in your peer coaching and your warm up and your skill exploration to let people experiment with picking up heavy things and let them try to develop different tools so that when they're out in the real world and they're trying to move something heavy, they'll have a better way to do it rather than just this little maneuver. Something like that, okay? So give your clients some useful skills and let them go out and try them on their own.